Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be going to Kamara once more and talking about the Dark Eldar. But the Dark Eldar have something new, and a lot of you guys watching that play Dark Eldar are going to be really excited about the new detachment because it is absolutely OP. And on top of it being really good, it just looks fun to play. A lot of the interactions that the new detachment allows for are really cool and look super fun. Which is another awesome thing, right? It'd be really lame if Dark Eldar got a new detachment that was really good, but at the same time was boring, right? Like if you guys got something that was all about just Cabalites shooting away at the enemy, probably be pretty boring to play. But this detachment is all about the close combat, and I'm all here for it. And if I do say so myself, I think the Dark Eldar community is in for quite a treat. So what are we going to be looking at in today's video? So first of all, we are going to look at the new Druhkari army and detachment bonus, the stratagems and enhancements that come with it. We're going to be talking about the best units to take in the detachment, a few insane combos that you can pull off with the detachment's hard matchups and what to look out for, and lastly, my prediction as to where the Dark Eldar will be in a month, competitively speaking. So starting off, just a quick refresher on their army rule, because their army rule also did get a buff. And it was actually one of the first things that I saw, and when I saw this, I actually thought this is all they got, and I was really disappointed. But I ended up gladly being wrong. Now, normally Dark Eldar start off with these things called pain tokens. They're kind of like, you know, the Leagues of Votann grudge tokens, except that you can spend these to get effects on your units. And basically, there's a lot of ways in which you can gain pain tokens, but the main ways are going to be killing enemy units and when enemy units fail Battle Shock. You can use pain tokens to reroll advance rolls, charge rolls, hit rolls, and it increases melee AP by 1 as well, which is really good, right? I mean, one of the things about the Dark Eldar that a lot of people were complaining about in 10th edition was their lack of AP, and they just got a little bit of that AP back. Okay, so let's get on to the juicy stuff. Let's get on to the detachment. So the detachment gives units that disembark from a transport the Lance rule until the end of the turn. That means that they're getting +1 to their wound rolls. And it also gives them ignores cover on their range attacks, which is very useful as well. Cabalites are, arguably one of the stronger units in the game as far as core choices go. So, now they ignore cover on their range attacks as well. Pretty good. And this is especially good when you consider how fast and how numerous Dark Eldar transports can be. And all of their transports recently got a small points reduction. Raider got decreased to 80 points from 90, which is significant, and the Venom got decreased to 70 points from 80 points. So quite a bit cheaper. And on top of that, a lot of Dark Eldar abilities revolve around hopping in and out of transports. So the Venom allows a unit to hop back in a transport after the fight phase is done. And of course, this detachment has a few cool stratagems which also allow you to hop back into a transport. So you're going to be getting more use out of this than you would initially expect, right? Normally, you'd expect to hop out of the transport, kill something, and then probably just not get the bonus again. But with the Dark Eldar, that's not the case, as they can hop in and out of their transports more often than a lot of other armies. They also got some new enhancements. So let's go ahead and talk about those. So the first enhancement is called Fantasmal Smoke. It's 20 points. Druhkari model only. While the bearer's unit is wholly within 6 of a Druhkari transport, models in the bearer's unit have the benefit of cover and stealth. So this is pretty good, but it's not that great. And I'll tell you why. And it's because basically Dark Eldar units are pretty squishy and they're not going to survive a lot of firepower. So while having stealth and the benefit of cover is good, it's not the greatest on units that are really squishy to begin with. So, you're probably not going to get that much use out of this for the high points cost that you are paying. Now, I could see the benefit of this on a tougher unit, but, to be real with you guys, it's just not going to be worth it on most units. The next enhancement on the list is the sadistic fulcrum. Now, the fulcrum actually is pretty decent. Basically, what happens is whenever the bearer's unit spends a pain token, if they are within 3 inches of that transport that they, arrived on, then that transport is also empowered for free, which is pretty good. It's not going to be great with, things like Raiders and stuff, because at the end of the day, they only have one Dark Lance, but it is a decent upgrade. And, it's only 15 points, so it's basically a free reroll for 15 points. Not the greatest out there, but also not terrible. And then, of course, we come to possibly one of the best enhancements in the entire game. Now, this would be good on anything, but it's especially good on Dark Eldar units because they are especially vulnerable to Overwatch. So essentially what this does is when you disembark from a transport, the bearer's unit cannot be targeted with the Fire Overwatch stratagem. And it's not just immediately, it's not just as soon as they come out, it's for the rest of the turn. You cannot do it until the end of the turn, which is extremely powerful. So that means you can't shoot them in the movement phase and you can't shoot them in the charge phase, which is a really great way to get around those torrent wielding units that might otherwise prevent your more fragile Dark Eldar from getting into vulnerable enemy positions. And it's only 20 points. It's absolutely an auto take. You want to take this in your list, basically regardless of what you're running, right? And that's just because being able to deny Overwatch is extremely powerful. You don't have to worry about a lot of things. Now, here's the little bit of, here's where you have to be careful with it. And basically you have to be able to disembark. So that may not seem like a big deal, but before the transport moves, when you declare that transport is moving, if your opponent has direct line of sight on that transport and they overwatch you and they kill the transport, unfortunately, you're going to be out of luck because the Nightmare Shroud only affects the bearer's unit. So you do have to be careful about that. It's not something that's going to protect you in every single situation, but your most typical situation where you actually successfully disembark and are going to either shoot the enemy unit or charge it, it's going to help you in those situations, and it's very powerful when it does. Spiteful Raider is the last enhancement on the list, and it's also the cheapest. It's only 10 points, and the bearer's unit gets an extra pain token, or you get an extra pain token, when the bearer's unit kills another unit, which is great, right? Free pain token, only costs 10 points, basically an auto-include. You can put it on a succubus. Succubuses are super cheap now, and, basically get a free pain token when the unit kills something. Now, granted, though, the enemy unit does have to be on an objective, but you're probably going to want to end up killing enemy units on objectives anyway, so it's not that big of a deal, but it is something you have to keep in mind. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to their stratagem. So first is Vicious Blades. Vicious Blades is kind of one of those hit or miss ones. I think it's pretty decent in some circumstances, but you're not always going to be able to use it, or you're not going to want to use it. So basically what it is you target a transport in your army right after that transport has selected its targets. And if there's any models inside of the transport, you roll a d6 for each model embarked within. You add 1 to the result if it's a Rax model, and for each 5+, that unit, or enemy unit I should say, suffers 1 mortal wound to a max of 6 mortals. This is pretty decent, but it's not super OP or anything like that. You'll probably expect to get somewhere along the lines of 5 mortal wounds with a rack unit and about 3 mortal wounds with any other unit. So, it does cost a command point. I don't think it's the most efficient use of command points, but it is kind of cool. Kind of allows your unit to stay safe inside of the transport and still deal some damage in melee. Wraith-like Retreat is really effective. Now, Wraith-like Retreat is what I wish that some Eldar units had. Basically, this is what it does. So the unit can make a normal or fallback move after combat, but unless it's a witch unit, it has to end its move within 3 inches of a transport, and then on top of that, embark within the transport. Now, this seems really good, and it is. It's super good. But, sometimes you're going to want to stay on that objective, and with this ability, you're not going to be able to do that. So there's there's a case to be made that this is a situational stratagem. However, that doesn't apply if it's a witch unit. And it's one of the reasons why I think witches are going to be super strong, because basically after combat, they can make an 8-inch move wherever they want to, which is going to be insane, guys. So, duck them behind terrain, out of line of sight. You could possibly put them back into a transport as well if you wanted to. You just don't have to. And there's just a lot of options that you can do with that. So, having a bunch of witches on the battlefield, first of all, they're pretty cheap. They're only 90 points for 10, and Venoms, you could split them up into 2 units of 5 to make them more efficient at trading and stuff like that. Succubuses are only 45 points a model. They're very cheap. So you can actually trade a lot and cause a lot of, kind of issues for your opponent. Now, for a stratagem like this, I would probably recommend using a bigger unit of witches, just because that's going to give your opponent even more problems, charging in with a unit of 10 witches, wiping something out, and then moving 8 inches behind some line of sight blocking terrain. That is going to be really good. And the thing is, witches are cheap as is. They're 90 points for 10. So it's really worth taking them in big numbers, I feel. And the benefit of this stratagem as well is that it's very versatile. So you can use it on pretty much any unit that fights in the fight phase, whether it be Incubi, Racks, even Kite Warriors might actually want to fight in the fight phase with the new bonuses of the detachment. So, AP -1 Kite Warriors isn't too bad. Okay, so the next one is called Splinter Assault. And this one is the one that has everybody going crazy, and it's pretty good. I don't think it's the best stratagem personally, but it is pretty decent. So basically, a unit disembarking from a transport gets sustained 1 on its range attacks, and if it's a Coplite unit, it gets sustained hits 2. Now, this is pretty good. It means that your splinter rifles are going to be hitting much harder. Your dark lances, your blasters have a chance to deal 2 extra shots, which is absolutely insane. Think about getting lucky with a dark lance and rolling a 6 to hit with the dark lance and then getting 3 dark lances out of it, right? So this is what has people going absolutely bonkers. But realistically, the chances of you getting a 6 on your dark lance are kind of low, even if the unit is empowered. But it is part of a great shooting combination that can absolutely floor units that are much higher pointed than the Kite Warriors. And especially with an Archon that is allowing you full rerolls to wound, this combination can be absolutely brutalizing. So, really good stratagem as well. Pounce On The Prey is another fantastic stratagem. Basically what it does is it allows you to charge after disembarking from a transport that had moved. And guess what? Dark Eldar transports happen to be some of the fastest in the game. So you move forward 14 inches, you get out 3 inches, and then you charge. And then on top of that, of course, because of the army special rule, you can always reroll that charge. If, of course, you choose to empower that unit, but most of the time it's not even going to be necessary because on average you have a 24-inch threat range. And that's just the average, right? If you're charging 20 inches, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be able to make that charge very easily. And especially when you have such potent combat units, this is going to be a massive control piece. So it's not just good for actually assaulting enemy units, it's good for making your opponent think about where they want to place their models. Essentially what it is it's a mind game, right? Your opponent knows you have a 24-inch threat range and doesn't want to get into combat with you, so they're going to move their units accordingly. And you can use this to buy yourself time early on in the game to build up your pain tokens, to build up your command points so that you can actually launch a full-on assault without having to worry too much about resource management, which is something that the Dark Eldar unfortunately lack just a little bit. So the next stratagem is basically Phantasm, but for Dark Eldar transports. It seems like our Phantasm got nerfed into Oblivion, and the Dark Eldar picked that up for their transports. But it does have a reactionary element to it. So it's not just like Phantasm where you could just use it whenever. Enemies do have to move within 9 inches of the transport, and then that transport can move 6 inches. So this is extremely good against fast assault type armies that want to close with you very quickly because it'll give you some extra breathing room. And again, it is reactive. Shooting units can just stay outside of 9 inches and just shoot you, but assault units don't have that luxury. And unfortunately for them, this stratagem is going to be something they have to worry about. Okay, now the last stratagem is Night Shield. So Night Shield gives a vehicle a 4+ invul save in the shooting phase against, of course, shooting attacks. Now, this is pretty good, but again, if your opponent can draw any heavy firepower onto your vehicle, it's probably going to die anyway, but it can help you mitigate some of the, lesser attacks, the single Bright Lance or the single Last Cannon out of nowhere. It can give you a decent save and chance to survive against that. But if something like a unit of Long Fangs or, unit of Fire Dragons, draws a beat on your Raider or your Venom, chances are that 4+ invul save, it might help you, but then again, it's probably not. So using this stratagem effectively is going to be based on whether or not you can determine how likely it is for your opponent to destroy your tank with or without the help of this strat. Alright, so what units are good in this detachment? So I basically have a list here. There are a couple of extra ones that I will talk about at the end of the video, but essentially Venoms and Raiders are mandatory as transports, Witches, Incubi, the mighty Kronos, Taos, and Kite Warriors. Venoms are your cheap and fast transports that are able to split Witches and Kobolds into 5 model units, which is really good. Units can jump back into them at the end of the fight phase, provided they are not engaged, which is crucial to getting the most out of the detachment bonus, and they do have solid damage against infantry. However, I would argue that Raiders are probably just as good as Venoms in this particular detachment because of the stratagem support that it has. And speaking of Raiders, Raiders are really good because they can carry big units of 10 to smash through most targets they hit. So that is important because a lot of your stratagems allow bigger units to be more effective. They also get the benefit of the Raider being able to advance the full 6 inches, allowing it to get into better positions for the inevitable charges. Witches are another great unit in this detachment as well. They're normally pretty weak, but with the Lance, which is +1 to wound, -2 AP on their weapons with a pain token, and buffs from Lilith and a Succubus, they become some of the most cost-effective melee units in the entire game. It's only 90 points for a Witch unit of 5 with a Succubus attached. And just in case you guys are wondering how effective they truly are for 90 points, a unit of 5 with a Succubus will on average kill 5 Marines no problem, and they will also kill about 3 Terminators on average when you factor in their blast pistols. So a Succubus can have a blast pistol, and of course the Hackerx can also have a blast pistol, and they're pretty good weapons at killing heavy stuff, and of course all the melee attacks that they get are really good too. So they trade really well. Yes, 5 Witches and a Succubus aren't going to kill a unit of 5 Terminators, and they shouldn't be able to, but they can kill a decent number of them and put a dent in the unit. They also prevent enemies from falling back easily once in combat. So, once they're stuck in, you can't get out, or you're going to have to take a bunch of desperate escape tests and possibly lose your models that way. Incubi are also a really great unit in this detachment, probably one of the better ones, although I would argue Witches give them a run for their money. They're a powerful melee unit with damage to weapons. They get full rerolls to wound with the Archon, and of course Lance in this detachment, which is +1 to wound. And as an added bonus, they force battle shock tests on enemy units, which in the past have been awful. It's not really a great ability, but of course it does generate you pain tokens if they fail that test. I do think Incubi are probably one of those units you want to consider running in units of 5. I know that it's tempting to run them in a unit of 10 with the Archon for those full rerolls to wound and all that, but I just think that's a little bit overkill, against most units in the game. And against vehicles and stuff, you're really not going to probably be able to kill those anyway, unless you really spike your dice on the wound roll. Even with +1 to wound, you're still wounding on 5s. So, yeah, you can kill probably lighter vehicles, things like Wave Serpents and, other kind of toughness 9 stuff that has a low amount of wounds. But against anything heavier than that, you're really going to be struggling. The Kronos is another great pick because the Kronos helps you out with pain token management. So it refunds pain tokens when used nearby on a 4+, making it very useful in an otherwise pain token hungry detachment. It is also tough for the cost and extremely useful for objectives. It's only 50 points and is basically an auto include in most Dark Eldar lists anyway, and it's no exception with this detachment. The Taos is also very good because the Taos is very pain token independent. Once it kills a unit, basically it's empowered for the rest of the game. Also, Haywire solves an issue that this detachment has with any vehicle that is toughness 12 or greater. So Dark Lances are going to be a little bit weaker in this detachment, I feel, just because of the fact that, you don't have as much incentive to take multiple units of Scourges and things like that, which are going to have Dark Lances. You're going to want to be, focusing more on the melee, and that means, of course, that, you're going to have a little bit more trouble against large targets. So Taos does quite a good job at being able to, mitigate that. And also, the bonus to AP really does help the Taos out in combat as well when it's empowered. So the Taos is quite effective, especially as a midfield bully unit and, area denial unit. It can deny area with the liquefier guns, which are essentially flamers. And of course, it provides a buffer to your more fragile transports. So a lot of opponents will want to close with you right away, try to destroy your transports and take away your strengths. The Taos can act as a really good buffer to deny that. Kite Warriors are obviously effective in this list because they were already effective and now they just get more bonuses, right? So sticky objectives and effective shooting against infantry makes these guys very scary in normal games and really good in this detachment. They have great stratagem synergy for sustained hits too, and the ability to hop back into the Raider afterwards. I think this is a fantastic choice. I think probably every single list using this detachment should have at least one unit of 10. So what other units should you consider in this detachment? So personally, I think the Solitaire is a great pick because he's a lone op and he has insane threat range. He's really good at taking out enemy characters as well with built-in precision. And again, you're going to be starved for CP. You're probably not going to want to do Epic Challenge all too much. So the Solitaire is a good pick for that. Void Reavers are also very good because they have good damage with their, either damage for base attacks for anti-large or their horde, anti-horde option with, 2d6 attacks and blast. And they cause battle shock tests, which mean more pain tokens. Reavers and Mandrakes are good for secondary objectives and trading. Scourges and Ravagers are good for anti-large. And lastly, I want to mention in as a little bit of a special thing, Racks. So Racks are good because although they probably won't kill anything, when they do in fact die, they generate a pain token. So this will help you in the later stages of the game when you need a lot of pain tokens to kind of make sure that your combos work and things like that. And also Racks are just a very cheap unit that's good at trading and, getting on those objectives and forcing opponents to react to them. Which will of course end up generating you more pain tokens because as your enemies respond to the Racks and kill those, they will expose themselves and your other units can take advantage of it. So Racks are another good unit. I'd probably consider having 1 or 2 small units of 5 in your army as well. All right, so as promised, I do want to go over some really cool combos that you can pull off with this army, and you should be looking to pull these off in the later stages of the game. So with this detachment, the early game is all about setting yourself up, trading, going for some light secondary objectives, things like that, saving up command points and pain tokens. And then in the later stages of the game, when you have the CP to pull off this stuff and you have the pain token support to pull off this stuff, to just absolutely go hog wild on your opponent. So the first combination I like to call the Comite Boys. The second is turning Hackerx. And the last is kicking Husk and taking Claves. So the Comite Boys, basically you take 10 Comite and a Raider with an Archon. You disembark either from the board or through Deep Strike, which you can now do, and use Skyborn Annihilation for sustained hits too. You also empower the unit as well for full rerolls to hit. The unit ignores cover with the Detachment ability and full wound rerolls with the Archon, and then you jump back in the Raider with Wraith-like Retreat. Now with Wraith-like Retreat, remember you have to fight. So the best way to use this is actually just move as close to an enemy unit as possible. And you can also use the stratagem, remember, to be able to assault after you get out of a transport, which is really useful. And, you can use both in the same turn. So do keep that in mind. It's not mandatory that you do that. I think the biggest part of this combination is just going to be the Skyborn Annihilation to get the sustained hits too. Everything else you put into the unit is going to be situational. You might not have to hop back in, right? You might not have to actually charge with the unit. But those things can be used and, you could be quite effective in certain situations. But of course, the big thing about this detachment is the major DACA that you're going to get from it. Now, the other cool thing about this combination is that because of the Darklance Blaster and Blast Pistol, they're going to be in the unit, and probably the Archon has a Blast Pistol as well. If you are close enough to the enemy, this unit can actually be pretty good at taking out monsters and light vehicles because of that sustained hits too, which also works on those blasters, blast pistols, and Darklance. It's not guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination, but with full rerolls to hit and to wound, this unit can do a lot more damage against those large targets than you would initially think. Okay, the next combination is called turning Hackerx. So this is where you move up a Venom or a Raider 14 inches and you disembark your witches another 3. You can use Pounce On The Prey to enable the unit to be eligible to charge, giving them an average 24-inch threat range. You empower them in the fight phase afterward, and watch as they carve into your foes with 15 attacks. That is, if it's a unit of 5, it's going to be 30 if it's a unit of 10. Rerolling all of your hit rolls, +1 to wound, and at -2 AP. And that's not even counting the Succubus or Lilith. So again, if you have Lilith in the unit, it's whatever you hit is just going to melt. If you have a Succubus in the unit, then whatever you hit, it depends on the target, of course, but mostly it'll probably also melt. And this is a really powerful combination, but the best part about this combo is it's cheap. It's only 90 points for 10 witches. Succubus is only 45. That's 135 points for a unit that can basically run through 10 Space Marines, no problem. No questions asked, can run through them very quickly. And even 5 Terminators. 10 witches with a Succubus will kill 5 Terminators on average dice. And to me, that's just absolutely insane. A 135 point unit killing a 200 point unit in close combat, no questions asked, in one single round. That's amazing. So witches are really looking good, and I actually think that they're a little bit better than Incubi even in this particular detachment, just because of their cost. They're so cheap. Incubi are good, no doubt, but they're also 75 points for 5, so they're much more expensive than your average witch. Now, of course, the last combination is kicking Husk and taking Claves. Obviously, Incubi are very good in this detachment as well. Either 5 Incubi in a Venom or 10 Incubi in a Raider is this combination. Again, I think 10 Incubi in a Raider is probably a bit overkill for a lot of units in the game, but this is very strong. There's no doubt about it, especially with all the buffs you're getting with the Archon included. With the Archon, you get to reroll all your wounds. So you disembark from transport using Pounce On The Prey, just like you did in the Witch combo. They charge in with 3 attacks each, hitting on 3+, wounding at +1 to wound with strength 4 and damage 2 weapons. You get full rerolls to hit and to wound at AP -3. Wow, that's disgusting, right? These guys hit like an absolute truck. And against pretty much any unit in the game, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's toughness 5 bikes, they're wounding them on 4+. If it's vehicles, they're wounding them on 4+. And again, I don't think vehicles are the best target for these guys, but they can do it in a pinch, right? They can hit monsters pretty effectively as well, as long as they're, toughness 7 or below. So light monsters, things like other Taos, Kronos, and things like that, they are disgusting against. And a unit of 10 of these guys will basically take out anything in the game, including the Necron Canoptic Wraith Blobs, which are really tough, but it doesn't really matter because this squad just has so much damage in combat that the Wraiths simply cannot contend. AP -3 will push them to their invul save. They will get a feel no pain, but that's considering that, the character isn't already dead. Which, if you do have the command points for it, Epic Challenge from the Archon will guarantee that the Cryptek will die pretty easily. And then from there, it's much easier to actually kill the unit. So, overall, unit of 10 Incubi with this combination with the Archon, full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to wound, will wipe out most units in the game, bar the toughest tanks and monsters. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about their strengths and the different cool combinations you can do with them, what are their hard matchups and what do you look out for? So I think depending on how you build your army, Custodes are going to be a hard matchup because they have fights first on objectives, which can really hurt a fragile combat-oriented list. However, of course, you can play around this, right? You can be more careful with your army, you can pick your battles better, and this can mitigate a lot of the Custodes' strength. However, you might just not want to charge a full unit of Incubi into a unit of Custodes on an objective. It's not a good idea. You're probably better off waiting a little bit for a better moment to strike. Vehicle-heavy lists will also give you trouble if your army is not equipped with a lot of anti-large weapons. So if you don't bring enough of those anti-large weapons, you don't bring your Haywire, you don't bring your Dark Lances as well, those armies will give you trouble. Indirect fire is also strong enough to dismantle your transports before they have a chance to do anything, and they are key to your victory and a lot of the detachment strengths. So if you don't get first turn against an army that's using a lot of indirect fire or artillery, chances are you're going to do pretty badly if you don't reserve your units properly. So what I would do in those situations is I would simply put my units in reserve and deep strike in the battle later, and you can still be pretty effective by doing that as well. because you definitely don't want to just let 3 or 4 transports die in the first couple of turns of the game. Okay, so where do I think the Dark Eldar are going to be competitively within the next month? So here's the thing. I think they're actually going to be one of the top 5 factions. I know that might be an unpopular opinion or whatever, but realistically, I think they have all the tools they need to succeed big time in competitive play. They have a lot of damage. They have a lot of mobility. The only weakness that they have probably is their fragile nature. They are very fragile. They're very glass cannon. But in the hands of an experienced Dark Eldar player in a tournament, they're going to be just fine. In fact, I think they're going to be really good. And again, I'm erring on the side of, conservatism here, saying that, they're going to be on a 54 to 56% win rate. I actually think they might be a little bit higher. And that's because I feel like once players get the hang of running this army, experienced Dark Eldar players, it's going to be very effective. And actually, one thing I want to mention is that one of the better Dark Eldar players in the community, well, 2 really, Skari, who everybody knows of course, because he has a YouTube channel of his own, is playing in a RTT pretty soon. And he's actually running this detachment. So if you guys want to check that out and see how he does in that event, I would check out his channel and look for updates on that. Another really good Dark Eldar player who runs things a little bit differently, a little bit unconventionally, is Chris at Phoenix Gaming. He has a channel as well that I've kind of mentioned on this channel a couple times. And he's really excited to play the new detachment as well and, shares some of my sentiments with how to run the Dark Eldar and how good this detachment is. And I think that once he gets the hang of playing it and once he kind of plays it in more games and stuff like that, he's going to be rocking and rolling as well. And it's just really good. Now, to clarify, one of the biggest reasons as well that I think this is going to be such a good and strong contender in competitive play is because they have an extremely good matchup against Necrons. And Necrons are going to be one of the strongest armies, if not the strongest army coming in, February and, until they get nerfed, essentially. And that's just because of the fact that they didn't receive any nerfs and they were already one of the strongest factions in the game with their new codex. Hypercrypt Legion is extremely competitive and so is Canoptic Court. Before the Dark Eldar got their new detachment, I feel like they didn't have a lot of tools against Necrons. They did have some tools, but, it was an uphill battle. You really had to know the matchup extremely well, and you had to really utilize a lot of combat units to be able to defeat the Necron menace. But now, with the increased lethality of the combat and just the increased amount of threat range that you have with a lot of the units from, stratagems like Pounce On The Prey, I think the Necrons are going to be in a lot of trouble. And it's definitely going to stop the Necrons from being, 60% win rate or 58% win rate, something crazy. So, because of that, I do think the Dark Eldar are going to be very strong. A lot of people are going to be playing Necrons in the meta. Dark Eldar are good against Necrons. Therefore, you're probably going to see Dark Eldar win rates skyrocket to a significant amount before things, kind of even out a little bit. And not to mention the top factions, Leagues of Votann, Eldar, and Chaos Space Marines all got nerfs while Necrons did not. And of course, the lowest factions got buffs. So Dark Eldar got huge buffs and the top factions got pretty big nerfs. And as such, I think that they're going to be one of the strongest factions in the game going forward. Now, obviously, though, they are a high-skill faction, so not everybody can, play them. And they're not going to be this, terror in your local game store or anything like that, because Dark Eldar are still hard to play. But competitively speaking, I do think they're going to be extremely powerful in the right hands. All right, so in conclusion, I am extremely happy that the Dark Eldar are strong again. They pretty much went from 0 to hero overnight. They have a great and synergistic detachment, and that is alongside a lot of point reductions to key several units, and I think this combination will spell success for the Druhkari and invigorate their true player base. And again, I don't think people who are going to meta hop are going to do very well with this army. It is a very hard army to play, especially for somebody who's not used to the very fragile units that Dark Eldar have. But if you're a Dark Eldar enjoyer and have been playing them for many years, you're going to love this detachment and you're going to have a lot of fun with it, and it's going to be an absolute blast for you. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and thank you so much to all my patrons and supporters for supporting the channel over the last year. Your support has helped the channel grow immensely and helped the community grow as well. If you do want to join the channel's Patreon, I have free trials activated, and a free trial will grant you permanent access to our Discord community, which is of course a community of Eldar players and enthusiasts who love talking about strategy, tactics, and of course hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description below. I'm also an Amazon affiliate and have a channel store page, so if you want to grab some Eldar-inspired apparel to rep your local game store on the channel store page, or you want to grab some discounted Eldar miniatures on Amazon, I will leave the links for those in the description also. Alright everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have some great games this weekend, everybody. Peace out.